Hey, this is Ryan from Rocket SaaS, and you're listening to the SaaS Marketing Weekly podcast, the show that gives you actionable marketing strategies and campaign ideas to rocket your SaaS business. And if you want even more SaaS marketing ideas, go to saasmarketingweekly.com to join my free newsletter. Hello and welcome to the SaaS Marketing Weekly podcast with me, your host Ryan, the founder of Rocket SaaS. And today we have a very special episode. We have a special guest, Kartik Krishnan. I was speaking to my team and I was saying to my team, does anybody know any marketing experts that we can get on the podcast? And one of my senior marketing people, Jess, the first name that came out of her mouth was you. She said, Kartik is a go-to-market expert, ex-Beamery, ABM specialist. He'd be great on the pod. So I'm delighted that you accepted my invite. So Kartik, welcome to the pod.
Oh, thank you. What an honor. What an introduction. Yeah, thanks, Jess. We've spoken before, and I guess I've spoken to a little bit about ABM, which is going to be the bulk of today's conversation. So yeah, excited to get into it.
Yeah, so ABM is what a lot of people are trying to do. A lot of people don't quite understand it right. A lot of people don't have the tools or the people, perhaps the wrong even business model for doing ABM. So I know a lot of our listeners are keen to learn more about ABM. So it's great to get an ABM expert on the show. But before we fully get into that, tell us a little bit more about your background in SaaS and ABM and go-to-market.
Yeah, and this is pretty relevant, I think, because after my time doing undergraduate in Nottingham University, I ended up getting a job at Google selling Google Ads. Now, why that's important is because I was selling a marketing product, classic Google Ads, our bread and butter for most digital marketers, but as I said, selling and actually account managing it. So I was a seller, and I fell into doing marketing on the back of that. But I guess I always had that seller instinct and that empathy for how sales is done, right? And then I ended up joining, so I did my MBA at Cambridge, got into the world of entrepreneurialism, decided startups are the way for me, joined Onfido. Onfido did really well. You've probably heard about them, right? Through the London ecosystem. And I was head of online marketing. Pretty quickly realized that you're not going to be able to sell big enterprise contracts just doing online marketing. So became head of demand gen, set up an inside sales team, got involved with Salesforce, HubSpot, all of that kind of stuff as well. So that's where I really picked up my B2B marketing nous, if you will. Spent some time at Founders Factory, great place to kind of really interface with early stage founders, build a new business from scratch, understand how funding happens, all of that good stuff. Moving on to CapDesk, now acquired by Carta. Again, head of growth there, set up the B2B marketing motion and market expansion into new territories, which is super interesting and probably where I picked up some sort of the ABM kind of thinking. Certainly got to deploy that at Beamery. So Beamery, large HR tech, 500 plus people, and more importantly, selling into the largest companies in the world, trying to do transformational sales there. And that really does require kind of ABM kind of efforts, although I will argue maybe not always. We can talk about that. And then off late, I've been doing freelance work for a few different businesses, helping them get started on ABM because they either have a very specialized market that they're going after or a certain set of clients that they need to expand into. And that's where I think I have a skill set that is useful. And that's what I've been doing for the last 5-6 months.
Yeah, love it. So yeah, I think one of the key things you said there is enterprise deals. So we have a lot of, I have a lot of SaaS clients that are going after enterprise deals at maybe 100K plus annual subscriptions, or I have a lot of clients that do the smaller deals, but they'd love to get a few enterprise deals as well, but they just don't really know how to go about it. And I kind of agree with what you said in terms of just doing marketing, like just doing LinkedIn ads, hoping that a C-suite at a big enterprise company is just going to be scrolling their LinkedIn, see an ad, click onto a landing page, fill out a form, you're on your way to landing a big, massive 100, 200K deal. It doesn't usually happen like that. You might get the occasional one, but that's certainly not really the strategy that's going to work to get these big enterprise deals. You need to be doing ABM. So let's get into that. Let's start at the very basics, like what is ABM? I had a meeting just yesterday and a guy used an interesting analogy. He described it as spearfishing.
Right.
So as opposed to if you was fishing and you just threw a massive net into the ocean and you dragged the net back and you hoped that there were going to be some fish in there, which there might be. That's kind of traditional spray and pray marketing, if you like, which is effective for a lot of deal sizes. But if you are going after these big fish, then you need to be following that one fish with your eyes, get your spearfish out, and then you've got it that way, very hyper targeted.
Yeah.
So is that a good analogy? How would you describe ABM?
I agree. You know, spearfishing, what spearfishing implies, I guess everyone will have that image in their mind, is very intentional, as you said, right? Like you're picking your fish and you're sort of going after it. Although I don't love the hunting part of it, but that's okay. Anyway, but what I will just challenge though is that it doesn't have to be always only the largest size fishes. So the piece about the enterprise side of things, I'm arguing that if you're an early stage business, you have limited resources. You don't want to throw the net out there and see what comes back in, and worse, get distracted and go after all these fish that are going to pull you in lots of different directions. That's worse for you as an early stage business. Or even a middle stage business that's obviously nowadays we know that like resources are tight, margins aren't great. So you can't afford to be, again, going around here, there, and everywhere. What you need to be doing is pretty much being fairly intentional with who you're targeting and why. And as I'll probably go on to say a little later on, I think we're now living in an age where there's no excuse to not know about the state of play with an account. So you need to be able to be quite intentional. And therefore, even if you're only going after a 50K a year or even 20K a year, but you know your target market, and perhaps your target market is particularly relatively small, you need to be focused on them. And then maybe you'll get the odd fish that's not your, very intentional, I'm spearfishing for these type of fish, but that should be the edge case, not the norm.
Mm-hmm. So in terms of like deal sizes and companies that should be using ABM or shouldn't be using ABM, do you have an idea in your head as to what kind of typical deal sizes they should be?
Yeah, I think, this is all comes back to what you've already got in motion. So if you're a business that's got marketing that is working, I've been a big fan of like inbound from the past. So if you've already got some inbound working, fine. Maybe you want to keep your ABM activities to the biggest because you're going to create some additional budget. Maybe you're going to add some new resource in those lines. But what I've been saying to early stage founders is right from the get-go, be very intentional, be very focused on what you're doing, right? So even a business that's can sell deals right from 10 to 100K. I'm literally working with a couple of these right now. 10K a year to 100K a year, doesn't matter if it's dollars or pounds. I'm telling them, even with the 10K businesses, be very focused on who you're going after. Create a list. Let's send the right message to them. Because one of the things that we're now dealing with is just the noise in the market, right? Saturation points are being hit. Everyone's saying similar things. You need to be able to say something quite precise, quite meaningful. That old adage of right message, right time, right place. It's on us as marketers to really deliver that. Gone are the days of like 50% of my marketing is working. No, that's not good enough anymore. That's not going to lead to the GTM efficiency you need. So to come back to your question, I would say anywhere over a 10 to 15K deal size, you might be quite ABM-esque. You won't limit yourself to maybe saying, I'll only go after 10 accounts. Your list will be longer, but you need to have a list in mind, and then you progress from there. And then at the other end of the spectrum, just to bring in some of my experience with Beamery, for instance, they're selling a tool that not only has to, there's the usual levels of, complications of adopting a new tool, right? But in this case, it was almost a new way of companies doing their talent acquisition, skills-led approaches, right? So you almost needed the business to transform itself. So you are a consultative solution that's almost guiding those businesses. And therefore, you'll hopefully get to sell a huge 200, 300K deal, but actually land and expand even from there. Great, right? But all the more reason you have to be even more ABM-esque, where you have to line up the different parts of the buying committee so that they actually understand the value. They have the internal momentum almost to create that and make it happen. Mm-hmm. So ABM, in my mind, can encompass all the way from 10 to 15K worth of ACV done intentionally, all the way to, whoa, if we don't do this where we are intentionally telling everyone transformational impact of buying our tool, it won't work at all.
Yeah. Okay. So let's say if so we defined that ABM can work if it's sort of over 10, 20K deals. And then how do you get the list down to be so narrow? So typically in marketing, like when you're running LinkedIn ads, you put in the filters. Let's say if it is HR, you say, I want to target HR people that are working for companies between 50 and 500 headcount in the UK that have got these job titles, head of HR, head of learning and development, blah, blah, blah. But then you've still got, that filter would probably give you 100,000 individual people.
Yeah.
And that is obviously too big to be doing ABM. So I've heard the guys at Full Funnel saying things like your ABM list needs to be between 50 and 100. I can't remember if they say companies or people. I think it's companies.
Yeah.
But so if you are using those traditional filters and you still got tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands, what's the approach to get it more narrow so you can start doing this ABM spearfish approach?
Yeah. And that's where we come to our old friend as marketers, the sales and marketing alignment piece, right?
I thought you were going to say ChatGPT, but that's our new friend.
We'll talk about that later. Yeah. But look, this is a moment to really get under the skin of sales and marketing alignment, i.e., why are these accounts? Why are these the accounts that we should pick? And you know what? It's interesting the conversations that will then unlock, because sellers will say, I have an instinct that this is going to be a good purchase, is going to be a good buyer for us. Well, instincts are good, but look, let's crystallize that. What do you think they're going to, what of our features, what product are they going to use? Why? How do you get the sense that they're ready to adopt now, right? But that's where you then have the meaningful conversations. And pretty soon you're able to create sort of account plans per account or for a group of accounts. And that's where I think the true value lies. So to kind of whittle it down, to come down to a meaningful list, I think you should challenge your sellers, certainly the leaders, to be like, really, you think that industry is good? Well, what is the characteristic of that industry that makes them really good? And maybe there's a subset of companies within that that's really meaningful. Would you rather I spend my resource going after, okay, Microsoft? Everyone wants Microsoft. Everyone wants Google at some point in their careers if you're selling to a tech set of companies. But are they realistically going to buy? Is there signals? Do you want me to spend my resource on them? Or should we go after these second tier, third tier of the same kind of category of accounts, but they're showing some intent signals in these lines? And then to build upon that, that's what I mean by sort of account plans. Don't be scared that you have to do this per account, but at least for a grouping of accounts, you want to know what is the main hypothesis, what's the main message you're going to go to them with, which is likely to resonate and create value and create dialogue, right? So what we did at Beamery, I think that was really successful, and I've now implemented this in multiple accounts, is almost sort of say, you think we should sell to that account? Why? What is the main reason? And then make that a big part of your message. So then that could be in the form of the emails that are going out. It could be in the ads. Ideally, it's also in the ads. Then you're creating that kind of surround sound. You're really there all the time, showing how you'll be able to add value in a certain way. And then the other trick for me is events, webinars that, again, kind of underline that message. See, we've done this with another account. Don't you think you should hear about this? And hopefully the account will go, yeah, you know what? At least one of us should attend this. We need to hear about this. This is the future. That's how you then start to build those bridges. So you're creating, you're pushing your sales team and yourself to know what is the value add that you're going to go after.
Yeah, nice. Okay. And then, so if you could outline it in whether it's like a step-by-step approach or just an order that you do things to build up an ABM account plan, how would you go through that?
Nice. Yeah. I mean, it's end of Q1 now. A lot of companies will be thinking about Q2 planning, or by the time they're hearing this, probably it'll be early Q2. But point is, this is a moment to maybe start to rethink what are your targets? What are you trying to do in Q2, right? And if you think of a set of accounts, I want to propose a both top-down as well as bottom-up approach to marketing planning, i.e., first we start with some of the major accounts. Maybe some of them are like pending from Q1 and low-hanging fruit. Of course, let's see how we're going to tackle them. And then you need to supplement that, because as marketers, we know we can't just go after 5 accounts. We want to go after a few more. So you make it that 50, 100 list. And then you choose your plans based on, these are the very important ones. We will make efforts, like we'll set up a webinar, we'll create a roundtable or something just for those accounts. But in the meantime, there'll also be a trade show. There'll also be a piece of content you're putting out. Who is this going to be relevant for? So that's the bottom-up piece. But across that top-down and bottom-up piece, you're trying your level best to say, I'm hoping that one of the 100 or a bunch of the 100 accounts will resonate in this place. I'm going to this trade show. 5 of those accounts are going to be there. I have to meet them, but I'll meet a few more as well. That's how you then do your marketing activities priced in through the quarter. That will then help you get enough traction, I think, across those 100 accounts.
Yeah, let's talk about the webinar / podcast at like lead magnet and kind of where that sits in ABM, because I'm a big fan of that. I remember learning about that last year. But yeah, talk to me about how like creating that as an asset and then inviting your target accounts can really be effective in ABM.
Yeah, again, so sorry, I keep using this word, but that's the intentionality of it. As in, your webinar topic and indeed the webinar panelists, for instance, are aligned with a particular part of that 100 list. So in other words, I'm going to move on to, let's say, in a fintech context, I've got some companies who are a payment providers, but are looking to literally unlock a new type of payment. They've set up new integrations. So it's my job to figure out which of the 100 lists are most likely to resonate with that. As long as that's a good amount, I will set up the webinar where there's an expert who has done this kind of thing before. They may or may not be a customer of my clients, but they're an expert. They're someone credible. Someone else wants to hear from them. And then I'm going to send out emails to the subset of accounts being like, hey, I'm doing this because I really believe this will be of value to all of us. It's not a salesy thing. You try and keep it non-salesy, because people don't buy from anyone who's just pushing sales down the throat, right? So you try and make it so that, don't you think this will be of value to you? They happen to say that this is important to do right now. We can help you with that. That, to me, is that organic win-win scenario that you've created using a webinar for a subset of your accounts.
Yeah. I think if you had a list of 100 C-suite people at enterprise companies and you went through those 100 people and you served them all ads, and then you got the salesperson to reach out to them to say, hey, would you like a demo? I wouldn't be surprised if you got 0 demos. However, if you went through those 100 people and you served them all ads, so they've got brand awareness of you, and then instead of asking them to do a demo, you said, we've got a webinar coming up. I've seen your profile. I've been on your LinkedIn. I see you used to work for this company. You now work for this company. You've got great experience. I love that LinkedIn post you did the other day about this, that, and the other. We're looking for guests for our next podcast roundtable. You seem to be an expert in the space. Would you be up for being a guest on the podcast or webinar? And if you send that to 100 people and you do that research about each of them, like I really wouldn't be surprised if you get a good sort of like 30% of people that are either interested, a decent chunk of them that say yes. So suddenly, let's say of the 100, you might get 20 people that are up for doing it. You've got 20, you can have 20 different webinars or get them all together on a roundtable. And then obviously when you're doing a podcast or a webinar with someone, you're building a relationship, you're building a friendship. You're probably going to have a call before the webinar. You're going to do the webinar, have some fun together, maybe do a call afterwards. You're going to have each other's emails and you're basically going to be friends. And it's very easy to sell, to then go on and sell to someone that you've got a relationship with.
But you've gone to the even more nuanced end of this, as in, like almost inviting the C-suite people onto webinar. And yes, and it's authentic. You want to hear from them. This can be the start of a relationship, and hopefully one fine day, maybe a sales relationship. But what I was also saying is you've already locked in the people who are on the panel. So you can't keep inviting more and more people, or you choose to do it as a webinar. But you know what will happen? I think you send the emails to the right people in the account who are interested, and you've got a reason why they should be interested. Even if they don't join themselves, they'll pass it on to their colleague being like, hey, that person, we should hear from them, join it. And I've seen that happen so many times. And then by the way, with my webinars now, I always make it a case of join the webinar live, send in questions, or just get the recording. because you never know, like it's not as punchy as if they attend, but at least they get the recording. They're associating you with solving a problem that they might need solving in some time. You'll hopefully be there and thereabouts when they do need to solve that problem. Does that? So that's the slightly more scaled version of what you just said, but yeah, it's all the same kind of concept.
Yeah, it's basically trying to get someone on the call on some kind of a call, some kind of engagement, which is not salesy, that is trying to help everybody in the industry. That's the way to get in with ABM. And have you ever gone down the route of using like direct mail or sending people gifts or funny items in the post? I know a lot of companies do that with ABM.
Yeah, we did try that at Beamery and at another place called Silvera. I would say that the trick there is it's just so much harder to know people's like physical address, and I'm quite glad for that. That's the way it should be. But that just makes, to my mind, it's certainly not something that I have had a tremendous amount of success with regards to doing that at scale quickly. So it might take a lot more bedding in. Maybe if you're working in a larger business that happens to have information already, then fair enough. But in the kind of businesses I've tended to work with, smaller scale, they're trying to build connections into people around the world. Direct mail hasn't been my biggest tool. On the other hand, though, what I think is really of value is if you can create something that is, maybe it's a series of webinars such that they can join some of it, or maybe it's like AMAs. I've done things like that where, hey, come ask us anything or ask our experts anything. And, almost like we're starting to keep the conversation going and you're really feeling like this is solving for you, then that's akin to sending something direct to them, right? It's one-to-one. It's almost for them. It's something about what they need. So that's where I would lean. That's what I've done at scale.
Yeah, like him. Okay. And then in terms of when you're running an ABM campaign, what kind of metrics do you use? How do you measure the success of it?
Yeah.
Obviously, how many sales you make.
This is exactly right? So, but the good news here is that for 100 accounts, by the end of like a quarter, you should be able to say something meaningful about, we have engaged so many of them. Now, this is where the challenge will become like attribution and causality. Like, was it because of the ABM effort or was it because of underlying something else? But this is where you hopefully you get credibility in the business. Your leadership buys into the notion that because we're being focused on these 100 accounts, we'll get way more traction than if we weren't, right? And then another way that I've heard at scale to measure this is probably, I really like the concept of FIRE, a lovely acronym, which is fit, intent, recency, and engagement. If you think about all those metrics, I think that really kind of summarizes when you should be prioritizing an account and when you shouldn't, because they're the right fit. Like, you almost want a certain threshold on that. So all the accounts they're in your 100 list. So you should be only going after them because they're a good enough fit. But maybe there's like the ones that are highest fit, right? What kind of intent are they showing? Are they just interested in talking, or are they showing some intent that actually says that this is a problem? And the recency piece to it. Are they saying that they're going to solve it by end of this year or next quarter? Okay. And then the engagement almost also shows that across, let's say, lots of people in that account, lots of people are aware of you. They're like so close to buying. And that's when you go, hey, we've got everything high on this FIRE rating for this account. We must be able to sell soon, or what's going wrong. And then, sometimes in that what's going wrong conversation is when you eke out a lot of learnings about true product market fit, true commercialization, true go-to-market fit, So that's what I advocate for.
Nice. Okay. And is that how you look to scale it, or when you're seeing success, how do you scale it? Is it just more volume? Do you have to start with a small number of accounts and you can ramp it up from there?
Yeah, that's a good question. What I would say is, I think it's the second, third times that you're hitting the account that it really becomes interesting and almost challenging, because you'll have done, like for the 100 accounts this quarter, you'll have done a bunch, got some intent, got some engagement. Great. But you probably haven't won them yet. Okay, what do you do the second time around? How do you make sure that there's a new message, a meaningful message, something else that's going to drive urgency now? So then you have to sort of iterate. Maybe, so that's where you use the FIRE rating to maybe even decide that some of these are worthy of one-to-one approaches. We have to almost engage them at the C-suite level, and our founder has to go and meet their founder so that they can then converse, and then the trust is built. So that's how the urgency will come. And at the other point, I would say as soon as you've got 1 or 2 quarters of this sort of ABM work under your belt, you should also be advocating for or running some experiments in new segments. So beyond this first 100 or 150 or 200 by then list, you almost want to scrap that to one side and then go after some accounts in a completely different region, a new segment. To me, that is scaling ABM. So ABM is about that intentionality. And I've got some work happening on my most important target accounts at sales, and we all believe should be the focus accounts. And then you're also trying some experiments, because that's when you go back to the business and say, hey, I think there's something here in this new category, this new segment. That's how you unlock really good growth and sustainable growth.
Yeah, nice. And in terms of growth and scaling things and getting things done faster with less manual work, how are we involving AI tools, workflows? Do you have any particular recommendations around that?
Yeah. When I said at the beginning of this conversation, we can't afford to go in blind anymore. There is enough tooling out there to know a good deal about any account, right? So right from one to like just putting in prompts into an account and being like, how will this account resonate with my message? And God knows the prompts, the LLMs are getting so good that they'll predict it fairly well. I've seen that. Of course, you can't do that manually for hundreds of accounts to whittle it down to that main target list. So that's where I've used Clay to run multiple prompts at the same time, right? So the same prompt over and over for the same set of accounts. Really nice. So I've used it to help me with selecting accounts, seeing who's going to resonate with what type of messages, things like that. Then, actually, one more mention here is even more if you want to do like transformative sales, as I mentioned earlier that I did with Beamery, I would want a tool that's sort of ingesting information about the account down to some of them are now looking at every single earnings call, every single bit of PR they put out. So you really get a sense of what is happening across that account, why, who are the key stakeholders. Maybe you layer that in. So there's tools like Sales Motion and Revved Up that do some of that I've played around with, not used at scale. And then simultaneously, so that's about account selection. On the other side of things, it's also, as I said, you've got to get pretty deep with who you're targeting, like the people in that account and why, and what should be the message to them. So that's again where you can start with just using it at LLM, saying this person, upload their profile into Claude or whatever from LinkedIn and tell them, assess the profile. How will they react to this message? What will make it more punchy? They'll get some clues and tips out of that itself. But beyond that, again, scaling that, I've used Clay again to sort of understand everyone's LinkedIn, understand what I want to say to them, how I want to tweak my message, why this webinar might matter for them. Like you said, you can almost get to the point where you're assessing like, their recent posting and saying, because you said this, because of this particular concept in your role, you might find this interesting. You can get to that levels of granularity. And again, you may not do this for every one of the people in your list, but you'll make a certain effort for the ones that you've had some traction with them as low-hanging fruit. Let's go make a real effort on those accounts. And sometimes just by thinking through that piece, you'll sharpen your message so much more. So that's how I've used LLMs across both the account selection piece as well as the targeting of personas piece, and then I scale it.
Yeah, nice, love it. Yeah, I've used ChatGPT to help narrow down the list at the beginning of the process. And I always say to clients, like often the answer as to who you should be going after with ABM is in your existing clients. So if you've got a big CRM with lots of existing clients, download all of that, obviously remove any sensitive information, put it into ChatGPT, for example, along with all like the sales notes of this is what the challenges were when they first spoke to the sales team, and say, look, I've got these 1,000 customers or 1,000 like leads over the last 12 months. This is now who I want to target. These are the deal size I want to go after. How would you, what similar trends can you see with our existing customers? And then I think AI can really kind of help you do that. Otherwise, it's just the senior leadership and maybe the sales team in a room going, I think it's this, and I think we should go after these people. And often what you find is the CEO's like, I want to go after these people. And it's like, yeah, but you've never actually had much success in those areas.
Yeah.
we've had a client recently that we lost because we weren't getting the results, because they basically came to us and said, your job is to go after these accounts. I said, okay, great. How many of those accounts have you won in the past? Like, none. We want bigger clients. We currently focus like mid-level. We want enterprise. And it didn't work because then if you want to go after different size deals, particularly bigger like enterprise, you need to do a lot more than just new marketing campaigns. Your messaging, your positioning, your brand, your website, your case studies, your use cases, a lot needs to change. You can't just be like, I want bigger, go after them. So I always say, look at your existing clients. That's where the clue is. And if you want to go into a different area, it's probably a bigger exercise than just launching a campaign and hoping it works.
That's why I say it's all about GTM, right? Everyone's going to be bought into it. The product has to be aligned. The sellers have to be aligned for sure. It can't just be a marketing effort. And then to your point, I would just say, the other thing I would have challenged them with is to almost say, as a founder, what is your narrative to these accounts? What are you going to say if I did get them to sit down in a meeting with you? Almost like bring that to the fore. Challenge yourself to know what you would say, and let's build on that. So why do you think we deserve to? Why do we have a right to win those enterprise accounts? Founder, tell me. I'll turn that into some sort of marketing message. But by the way, you're always going to be front and center when that does happen, because these are your dream accounts. You must be a leader on it. And so when I've done all these webinars, even with early to medium stage businesses, I've often encouraged the founder to be the person in there. But like yourself, Ryan, almost you have to, keep expanding your knowledge base and challenging yourself, and then expanding your business along with it, saying, now I think we deserve to win these type of clients because we've started to build in this direction. Let me check my hypotheses.
Yeah, love it. All right, well, that's been awesome. I've certainly learned a lot about ABM, so thank you for your time. And if any of the listeners want to have a little look into you, or if they've perhaps got any questions about ABM, where can they find you?
It's funny. I've basically become a LinkedIn man for my sins. So I'm on LinkedIn. You'll easily find me, I think, Kartik Krishnan. Maybe one of a few Kartik Krishnans, but Kartik Krishnan Expedite GTM, you'll find me. I'm pretty active. I will hopefully post some useful stuff, but also respond to direct messages on there. That's the best place to find me.
Awesome. Well, well, thank you so much for coming onto the pods, and hopefully we'll get you back as a guest sometime soon, whether we're talking more ABM or something else, who knows? But yeah, thank you so much. And we'll catch up soon.
Pleasure, Ryan. Thanks for having me.